You may be well aware by looking at me that I don't give a lot of care to my haircuts. I don't go to fancy salons or anything like that. As a matter of fact, when I get a haircut, it is weird. I am a talker, so you could put me in any circumstance and I overtalk. I hold my family up. I can be in a grocery store with Mary walking around and I just see somebody wearing a t-shirt and I'm like, oh, that is a cool t-shirt, and we'll be in a conversation for 30 minutes while my entire family is rolling their eyes and just wanting to kill me because the conversation's about nothing. But when it comes to getting a haircut, I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk. All I want you to do is do your job. I don't want to talk. And the pricier the haircut, your hair looks better, but it also seems like it comes with the stipulation that they feel like conversation needs to be a bigger part of it because they're charging you so much. So they've learned how to engage in all these conversations that I don't want. I don't want your conversations. And sure, I could go in there and tell them that, but then I feel like I'm being a jerk. So I just don't want to deal with it. So I go to Great Clips. And when I go into Great Clips, the thing about Great Clips is one, they put in the system, he just wants his side shaved with a 2 and he wants his top clipped like half an inch. They mess that up sometimes. Because that's very simple, but they still mess it up. But yet, most of the times they don't talk. Sometimes they do. And so this week, one of them did. She was new, and she was talking, which is fine, but I'm not into the whole talking thing. I don't even go in and be like, I'm a pastor or anything like that. I don't talk. I just want my hair cut. But she's new and she's telling me, she's like, I haven't cut hair in a long time, which, by the way, I sent Mary a text right before that because the guy right before me, this is terrible to say. She jacked his hair up so bad, right? Like, it was so bad, he's up there complaining, and like, I've not seen haircuts jacked up so bad that you can't do nothing about it. Like, it's pretty rough. Like, you just got to go baldy at this point. Like, that's pretty rough. And I knew I was next in line with this person, and so I sent Mary a text, and I believe it said, this is going to be fun. I knew I was going in there, but I wasn't going to say anything, so I go in there, I sit in her seat, and she's talking to me, and she's like, I haven't cut hair in a long time because I've been raising my daughter, but now she's in school, and she's in this school, and she's talking and stuff, and her daughter's going to Catholic school, and she said, so, to get to the point of the story, she said, so, I'm converting so that I can be a part of my daughter's church. And I was like, trying to process everything that was going on. I'm like, first of all, I'm deathly worried because normally I don't care about my hair because like we could just shave it, but like she's making me doubt my worries about my hair. And then she's talking about conversion in the same sentence with just joining a church, but the reasons behind it. And we talk. The rest of that moment's nobody else's business, but we talk. But it made me start thinking about this message today. It made me start thinking about the whys. The whys. Why are we here? Why are we following Christ? Why? Are we confused about our whys? Are we confused? Because conversion shouldn't have anything to do with where our children attend school, or because it's a cool place, or because we like the people, or anything like that, right? Like, when we understand following Christ, when we understand salvation, we understand, and today we're talking about a word that Christ puts on it, because when we belong to Him, we understand what it means to be a disciple. The whys are important, and we should understand the whys. As a matter of fact, today, Christ starts talking about not only the whys, but the cost of the whys. Do you understand that if we belong to Christ, then we are disciples? That's how He referred. We are His disciples, and what that means. Because it definitely means more than I just attend a church. Definitely means more than that. This whole year for me, it kicks off at different times. January 1st should have been when it kicked off, but it didn't. It actually kicked off before that. Kicked off the week before Christmas for me, because that night we were supposed to have a communion during life group. And instead of a communion, last minute, day before, Sean calls. And he says, can we get baptized? And I'm still thinking, sure, like maybe we're going to get baptized in a home, like maybe even a warm bathtub. That's not what Sean's thinking. And then I was thinking, maybe a pool, and Sean's like, no, I want to be out there in the water, in the ocean. And so for me, that moment, I didn't acknowledge it the next week, and I should have. But that moment, when you and April went into the water, that began my whole year. It was a beautiful moment. And it was a reminder for me. It was a reminder of me why we do what we do. Because it's about people. It's about people celebrating the joy of Christ in their life. It's about those moments. But it's about so much more. That's what discipleship is keyed into. And so today we're going to talk about discipleship. We're going to talk about it in Jesus' Word. We're going to share some insights into that, hopefully. But that's what it's all about, is discipleship. In Luke 14:25 through 26, it says, now great crowds accompanying him, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. That is a strong statement, because what we're saying is that we're disciples of Christ. That's really where it's at. If we belong to him, then we are a disciple. And he's saying that the defined in this discipleship is that we're not his disciples if we don't hate our own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, and yes, even your own life. I'm going to tell you something. When I read that, right, if I was to take that literally, I'm like, well, that's definitely not me. I'm a mama's boy. Like, I talk to my mama all the time. Now, yes, y'all have heard enough sermons to know she drives me crazy. And that's okay, but I talk to her all the time because I love my mom. But so did Jesus. Same person that's saying this right here, if you recall, when he's up on the cross, he's in immense torture, he's dying, he's at his end. He turns with what little strength he has left. He turns to his disciple, to John, and gives the instruction for him to take care of his mother, because she was that important to him. Leaves her care in John's hands. He didn't hate his mother. He didn't hate any of his family. But he is stressing something pretty important here. He's using the word hate to show how important it is to prioritize the relationship with God over any other relationship. That it should be such an immense amount of, like if you were to measure it, it would be the distance between hate and love. How can you measure that? That's a huge difference. And that's why he's using that to stress this, right? Like, our relationship with God should be a priority, not edging out in a race. It's not like horses running down the track and one edges the other out by a nose. No, the distance between it should be so great that it's like the distance between hate and love. That's what it should look like in a relationship. Now, those of us that come to church, those of us that belong to God, we use this and we use the idea that, yes, we put God as a priority, but are those just words? Are they just words that we're saying? Y'all know I read all kinds of stuff, and some of it's good, some of it's not so good. It's just stupid facts to have. But there's an actor that was doing an interview. His name's Austin Butler. I read this while we were at the cabin in in Alabama, and I don't know why it stuck with me, but it did. And in this interview, Austin Butler recently played Elvis in the movie Elvis. This is not a judgment on Austin. This is not a judgment on the movie. It's just some of the statements that he said that I just kind of picked out. But the interview started out with the normal, like, hey, you grew up as a child actor, you've done these parts and stuff like that, and where you're from, and how old you are, and so forth. And it started, and in the beginning of the interview, it said, you know, what drives you? And he said, the most important thing in my life is family. It's a brilliant answer. You'd be surprised how many people say that too. But it's a brilliant answer. It's a wonderful answer. Loved his answer. Had no problems with his answer. Then it goes on and talks about things that he's performed in before, and then it talks about Elvis, and he starts talking about how he's a method actor, and it took a lot to really get into this role. Again, actors do that. But in the interview, there was a surprising thing in the interview that he said. He said that to really prepare for Elvis, he had to become Elvis. And so for 3 years, he didn't even see his family. And he only talked to him once every couple of months, and they couldn't refer to him as Austin. They referred to him as Elvis for him to really get into the part. And as soon as I read that, then I was like, you know what? I believe if I actually talked to this individual, he would believe in his heart that he was telling the truth when he says that his family is his priority. But his actions say otherwise. His actions say that his acting, that his career is his priority. It's not a judgment. I'm not judging him from a pulpit, not even putting him down. I'm talking about words and actions. Right? Another actor, Andrew Lincoln. Why Andrew Lincoln? Because I used to like The Walking Dead. A lot. Andrew Lincoln was the guy, the main guy in The Walking Dead show. He's Rick. And the whole show's about Rick. He got to the point where he was being paid over $1 million an episode. Pretty impressive when you start counting up the fact that they do half a seasons in there, and so it's making like 26, 30 million a year. It's pretty impressive figures for an actor that's just doing a television series. It's one of the highest paid actors doing a television series. They didn't write him off the show. He came to a point where he said that it was taking too much time out of his family's life, and that he asked to be written off so he could be with his family more. It destroyed the show. Now, if you're a fan of it, but it did, because the show's about Rick, and they're still trying to go on with it. I can't even watch it. If you can, great. Again, some of these things shouldn't be coming from pulpit. But the fact of the matter is that this person who loves acting, his actions say that he does prioritize family. Sometimes we say things, we genuinely think we mean them, but our actions are the telltale. They measure out whether we mean them or not. We may say that we put God first in our relationship, but do we actually put God first in our relationship? I think the problem is the disconnect is that we think that if we put God first in a relationship, what that means is that if God is above my friends, then I cannot be friends with people. That's putting God first. That's not the same. On earth, there is nobody that I long to be with, that I love being with more than Mary. Mary, outside of God, is my priority. That doesn't make me a bad friend. I'm still a good friend to other people. That's my judgment call, not your call. I don't know how you... But I can still be a good friend to somebody even though I prioritize our marriage. Right? That doesn't make me any less of a good friend. But she's the priority. And above her, God is the priority. Doesn't make me any less of a husband by putting God first. Makes me a better husband. Doesn't make me any less of a friend by putting God first. Makes me a better friend. So Jesus was talking about these relationships, and he's like, if you're going to follow after me, it's got to be, and you've got to understand this, it's got to be me first. Above all others. And then he goes on to say in Matthew 12, 46 through 50, explaining this. This is another example of where he's run into it. People came out and he said, while he was speaking to the people, behold, his mother and his brother stood outside asking to speak to him. But he replied to the man who told him, who is my mother and who are my brothers? And stretching out his hand towards his disciples, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. The priority changes. Again, I showed you that Jesus is using words to teach other people, that we see in his example and his actions, that he doesn't ignore his mother, like that he does take care of his mother, that when she calls, even in the beginning of his ministry, and she's at a wedding and everything, she calls and she says, Jesus, I need your help. He shows up because he loves his mother and he loves his family and everything like that, but he's showing that the priority for God has to be an inclusion in our life, but not just an inclusion. It has to be the priority. It cannot be that our relationship with God is just something that's added in our life. Well, I have this and I have this and I got to make room for God. And then, making room for God is different ways, because as a preacher, I want to tell you that the priority, well, I don't want to tell you, but you probably think that I want to tell you that the priority has to be showing up for church. And because we're a church that does life group, that it's showing up for life group and stuff like that. Well, these are not the only reflections of God in our life, but I do know this, and I know this to be a fact, that when you are not doing those, you're probably not doing the things individually and private either. That those are falling to the wayside as well. But it can't be that we're sitting around and we're like, where do I add time for Jesus? No. If you ever find yourself in a place where my job and my relationships and everything in my life is so hectic that I'm having a hard time finding place for Jesus in my life, then you need to throw that whole calendar out and start over and figuring out how you can fit your job and your relationships around your time with Jesus. In Luke 14:27, he says, whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Now, the cross is a symbol of death. In the Roman Empire, now we wear it around our necks and everything else. We have tattoos of it and everything because it represents God, it represents Jesus, or we just think it's a cool symbol. But we have it everywhere, but back in Jesus' day, the cross only symbolized death. It was the ultimate punishment by the Roman Empire. It was a heinous way to die. And so when Jesus says, whoever does not bear his own cross, he's not only saying that we ought to prioritize God over relationships with others, but we also have to do that over our own selves, so that we have to put to death ourselves. And Luke 9:23, and he said to all, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. The funny thing is that cross didn't just represent death. Because there's many different ways. The Romans were very creative when it came to penalizing for death. They throw you in pits and let animals, you'd have to fight animals and the animals would kill you. You'd have to fight against other men in arenas and they would kill you. They would allow horses to quarter you. It just gets more gruesome. They had many different ways that they punish people by death. But the cross was the ultimate way to put someone to death, not because it was only torturous, but it was shameful. People would prefer to die in the arenas. They would prefer to be quartered by horses than to be hung in front of everyone on a cross for days in so that their family and everybody else that is involved with them would be shamed by whatever they did. And so in a sense, when he says to pick up your cross, it's not that we're just willing to die for Christ. It's not just that, well, hey, my self-interest can't go first. We're also should be willing to put our pride to death. We should be willing to face the shame of walking with him. Do you know what that means? That even in the simple things, like when I say shame, I mean being ashamed to talk about him over coffee with someone. Being ashamed to, or afraid to represent in a certain circle of friends, or to go out and to share that you know Christ in any area of your life. That should be put to death as well. Jesus goes on to not only in discipleship to talk about being a disciple, but assessing the cost. In Luke 14:28-33, he says, "For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, 'This man began to build and was not able to finish it.'" Okay, pause right there, Mary, because I'm going to leave this up. Counting the cost. Now, he's talking here about counting the cost of building something. I want you to understand something about discipleship. Discipleship means belonging to Jesus Christ, okay? Unlike most things, what he's not talking about is that we have to do something to be a disciple. To do something to belong to him. To do something so that we might be saved, because we can't. That's all on him. Now, everything that I've ever been part of in life, I had to do something to be a part of it. Everything. I don't care what it was. Like to be in a college, I had to do something. I had to have certain grades. I had to keep those grades up. There was action that was required of me to continue to be a part of it. While I was in college, I was in a fraternity. There was actions that were required for me first to become a part of the fraternity, and then there was actions that were required to remain a part of the fraternity. Okay? I couldn't be a part of it if I didn't do these things. Military, I had to go and I had to sign a contract, and I had to do certain things to not only be a part of it, but to maintain my membership in it. Everything in life. Being in the family of God, I don't have to do anything. Believe in him and I confess him as my Lord, and that's it. There's no action that I do that makes me a disciple or saves me. Jesus does all the saving. The cost that we're talking about here is not dependent upon us being a disciple or maintaining our membership, if you will, in the family of God. It is a reflection of our love. Love is action. The minute, and I keep going back to me and Mary because it's the easiest comparison that I can, the minute that me and Mary walked down the aisle, I did not sign a contract with Mary saying I was going to do everything that I was going to do in our marriage. Ooh, those would have been some long vows. Right? Like if me and Mary were to read off vows of everything that we're going to do for each other, and that was a part of the contract ahead of time, those would have been some long vows. That's not why we do them. I couldn't really say I love her if every time I looked at her and she walked in the room, I was like, oh, I got that warm, gushy butterfly feeling, right? And that's it. Imagine, Brandon, if you will. That's it, right? Mary, I want to marry you. She says yes. And for 20 years, every time she walks in the room, oh, she's so beautiful. I love her. I want to kiss her. You know, butterflies. And that's it. It's not love. It's not love. That's warm feelings. That's great. It might be a symptom of love, but love is action. In marriage, when you love somebody, there's going to be more than just sitting there having a warm feeling. You're going to care for them. You're going to lift them up. You're going to be the poor person that supports them when they're sick, when they're weak, they're having a bad day. The days where you're having a bad day and they're having a bad day, you're going to sacrifice how you feel so that you can make them feel better. That's love. You're not doing it because you entered into a contract. The actions that you're seeing, the fruit of those actions, is because of love. If we're truly disciples of Christ, there's going to be fruits of love that are expressed back to Him. That's the cost. That's the cost of discipleship. That's what He's talking about. You don't have to. Believing in Him and confessing Him with your mouth is all it takes to be a part of God's family. But if you did, then what you're saying is that profession is that you love God. And this is the hard part, right? Is understanding. It would be almost, I just can't even imagine the scenario where somebody that truly gave their life to God, that there wouldn't be any fruits of love in return. I can't. I do the things for God not because I feel like they're going to earn me anything, but because I love Him. I count it all joy. What king, I'm going to pick up where we were at, what king going out to encounter another king in war will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000. And if not, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks for the terms of peace. So therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. Making Jesus Christ Lord, we talked about this the other day, is not simply just accepting the fact that He died for us, but it's making Him Lord, and that's a surrender of my life. That's me giving my life to Him. And if I'm not willing to give my life to Him, no, I can't honestly say that I love Him. And knowing that I love Him means that I want to do those things that He desires of me. Jesus Christ talks about other people that followed after Him in Luke 9. In Luke 9, 57, 62, it says, as they were going along the road, someone said to Him, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay His head. To another He said, follow me. But he said, Lord, let me go and bury my father. And Jesus said to him, leave the dead to bury their own dead, but as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God. Yet another said, I will follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to those at my home. And Jesus said, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. He says to go out and spread the kingdom of God. Go out and spread salvation. Go out and tell them about me, but also to see that other people, that's the work. That's what Jesus is calling us to do, is to be a part of this kingdom work of seeing people to come to know the truth of Him, seeing people grow in Him, seeing people become His disciples. We're disciplers. It's a big mission. It's a huge mission. I told y'all before, the very first time I cried in St. Petersburg, was when we came down here thinking we were going to plant a church. We did. But thinking we were going to plant a church. And when I got down here, I was like, I don't even know where to start. It's just so overwhelming. So overwhelming. And I cried. I was like, I don't know what to do, God. You got to help me. Because it can be overwhelming. And it's overwhelming to think that Jesus Christ is calling us to a work, that discipleship, he wants us to go out and be a part of his work, his mission. And that can be overwhelming for anybody, to the point where you just want to turn it off. It's a big mission. Have you looked around yourself lately? Like when I don't know how you process it, but maybe just judging your eyes. I'll just judge your eyes right now, and I'll just make up scenarios in my head. Okay? But when I stand up here, or when Anthony stands up here and we say, listen, this year, we want to see the church more than double in size. Not because of the church, not because of the building or anything like that, but because of kingdom impact. Well, how do you think that we think that's going to happen? Just dawned on you, right? You. Then you start thinking about all the people in your life and how big St. Petersburg and everything. It's overwhelming, right? What does he want me to do? Evangelize the entire world? No. No, I don't. I don't expect that. I expect one. For every person in here really, truly focused on one person this year. And that one person was to come in here, the church would double in size. I want you focused on all of St. Petersburg or the world. Just one. Growing up, I had a very, very strange daddy. But I met many, many people in my life, many other men in my life that remind me of qualities of my dad, but I never met anybody like my dad who was so enthralled with work. My dad thought work was the answer to everything. Everything. And he would have me working from a young age, doing things that needed to be done, doing things that didn't need to be done just for the sake of work. He thought work was the answer to even sickness. Just sweat it out your pores. All right, just sweat it out your pores. You got the flu? Well, sweat it out. All right, that's fine. As a grown man, I had the stomach virus so bad one day, I got off a piece of heavy equipment. I got off a dozer. I walked over to my father and I said, that's the third time I'm thrown up. I'm going home. He said, well, it sounds like you about got it out of your system. I'm not making this up. This is my dad, right? My dad, growing up, he did do me a favor, though. He helped me go through friends to know who my true friends were, because if you came over to my house, my dad was going to put you to work. And if you didn't work, he didn't expect you to show back up at his house anytime. Like, don't come back next week because you didn't help out with this project, you know? And when I was like 12 years old, there was one project at our house. We live in the country, y'all know that part, but we live on a hill that goes down to a creek. And on this hill, it's a red clay hill. And when I say red clay, like to dig in this it takes a lot to dig a hole. And we live on this clay hill, and when it rains, it would wash right beside the house. One day my dad shows up, big semi truck that he borrowed from Ed Kelly is loaded down with cross ties. And cross ties are those the wood that goes up under railroad tracks. Okay, that they put the railroad tracks down on. Cross ties are 12 inches by 12 inches, and they're 8 foot long, and they're heavy as all get out. I'm 12 years old. My best friend Jonathan Harrell's over there. Truck shows up, and my dad says, we're about to get to work. I knew Jonathan was my best friend because he hung in there. But when we saw all those cross ties, I mean, there's hundreds of cross ties, my dad wanted us to etch steps in the clay and then tote the cross ties and put them in. My dad, and Mary can attest to this, is a big man, bigger than I ever grew into. I was born the runt of my family. All my uncles, cousins, everybody's bigger than I am. I'm the toughest, smartest, best looking, all of that, but I'm the runt of the litter. Like, they're all bigger than I am. My dad's toting a cross tie by himself, and me and Jonathan could barely drag one together. It's an overwhelming task. And it took us a couple of weeks to do it. And my dad had this stupid expectation, and I didn't realize it at the time, but my dad had this stupidest expectation that I didn't even understand Jonathan. I don't even know why he did it. I wouldn't have done it myself. But if you were at the beginning of the project, he expected you to be there for all of the project, right? Like, so Jonathan had to show up every day. He didn't live with us, but he had to be there every day. And we were putting in those cross ties. And at 12 years old, that was an impossible task. And maybe it was during that task of putting those heavy cross ties that I started with the mentality of I can't focus on the bigger picture sometimes. I just focus on one. And I wasn't never focused on, because if you go to that house now, this whole hill is just cross ties going down. That's all it is. But it doesn't wash anymore. But man, that was some work. And every afternoon I could think about was just getting this one cross tie there. That's it. I don't know exactly how long it took. I don't know when we finally looked up. But when that project was done, a couple things happened. No more damage, no more washing. It was beautiful as all get out. And me and Jonathan were best friends for life. Sometimes all you can do is focus on the one. Because I promise you that if I'd been focused on the bigger picture, I would have ran away that day. Said goodbye to that family. Some things are overwhelming. And sometimes when we think about the things that God wants us to do in life, we don't know how we're going to do those things because we don't feel equipped. The mission seems too big. Everything's overwhelming. We have to focus on the one. Because we're called to be disciples. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And being disciples, Jesus tells us that being disciples, that there's going to be a reflection of love, that there's going to be action involved. It's not about just sitting somewhere. It's not about just reading something. That there's actions involved in loving Him, in following Him, in being His disciple. There's a call in our life, and it's in every one of our lives. Every single person in here and the people that are not in here, everybody that belongs to Christ has to roll up their sleeves and be a part of His mission. Do you get that? This is the part where you nod your head. All of us, we have to roll up our sleeves. Jesus says in the following verses, He says, salt is good. He's comparing being a disciple to salt. Salt is good, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no use, either for the soil or for the manure pile. It is thrown away. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about what is the use for salt if it's not salty? First person that says to ice the roads, I'm a... Right? In your home. Why would I have salt in my home if it didn't salt my food? If it didn't add to the taste? It has a purpose, and it only has one purpose in my house: to make my food taste better. It doesn't have a purpose to be an ornament. Imagine if salt was animated and could communicate with me, and it's like, you know what? That sounds great. I love the fact that I make your steaks taste better. But what I would really like is I would really like to go up there on that shelf with that picture over there, because I think that we really align well, right? We don't clash. It would make it look good. I'd like to be an ornament instead. I'd like to just sit around your house and allow people to take the pleasure of just seeing me. I'd like to change my purpose in your household. Or, you know what? I know that I'm supposed to make things taste salty, but instead of putting sugar, who's always getting all the credit for the good stuff, in that mix right there, I'd like you to make your Kool-Aid with me. I'd like to change my purpose. It makes no sense. Well, listen, we were given a purpose as well. We were given a purpose to glorify God. That's our purpose in life. That's why we're here, is to bring glory to God. Now, if we're not doing that, it's the same as saying to God, you gave me a purpose, that sounds great, but I'd like to change my purpose to something else. No. That's not what we're called to do. So this year, you're going to hear this a lot. You're going to hear this a lot. You're not going to hear messages on discipleship a lot, but you're going to hear this a lot as our vision is to focus in on the one. Because this year, it is our goal, our desire, to do the things that please God. Amen? And we're going to do that one at a time. This morning, I'm going to play music.